Hello, everyone. I'm Kerry George with CIBN TV, and you can find other videos of ours helping business owners, helping women in leadership at CIBN TV on YouTube. And today I'm going to be talking about this figure in history, a woman who had to overcome personal tragedy. So if you've ever been in a place of where you had to overcome personal tragedy, and you've ever been in a place where you felt like, you know what? I've gone through all of that. I must be here for a purpose. This is the story of Esther, and you're going to want to stay tuned to hear all about how she changed the world at her time and how you can change the world at yours right now. So stay tuned to find out more about Esther and such a time as this. Hello, I'm Kerry George with CIBN TV, and I'm going to be talking about Esther today. And let's just frame this a little bit and put it into, context for those that are watching today. So this is happening at a time in history when men controlled everything in Esther's world. This is about 460 BC. And Esther is from a group of people. She's from the Jewish people. Her community is actually been very oppressed. They're being held captive by another government. Okay, just to kind of put this into context. And as Esther is growing up, first of all, her name was not originally Esther. Originally, her name was Haddasah. And it meant, in our English language, it meant Myrtle. Okay, similar language or similar context. Okay. What happened to Esther is a very young girl. She lost her parents. Her parents died. So she had this tragedy in her life in her early days. And fortunately, she had an uncle who stepped up to care for her. And this guy's name was Mordecai. So Mordecai, the Bible doesn't really tell us if there's other people involved in their lives, if he has other children. I really don't know the answers to that. But I do know that she has this uncle who is caring for her. So as she's growing up, she's a lovely child, pretty girl. And meanwhile, back at the kingdom, there's stuff going on, okay? So as she is growing into a fair young lady, the king of the land, who's got this crazy name, by the way, I believe the Hebrew pronunciation is something like Haddasah, something like this. It's like really hard to say, okay? In history, we call this guy Xerses the first. And he's the fourth king of the, another crazy word, Achaemenid Empire. Okay. May all the scholars forgive me. But this is what's going on. He's the king. He's the guy in power. And during this time, he has a wife already. Her name is Vashti. And the king decides he's going to have this great big elaborate party that's going to go on for like days and weeks. And he's invited all kinds of people to come to this party, really to celebrate how awesome he is. So if you can imagine having unlimited power, unlimited money, and you can have a party to celebrate yourself, well, that's what this guy's doing. Okay. And he's just bringing people from everywhere. It tells us actually in the story that Vashti also held a party for the women. Well, he's having a party for the men. And I want to just clarify a few things about Vashti, because over the years, I've heard Vashti's story told as well from a very male perspective. Okay. So I've heard preachers from the pulpit say things like Vashti wouldn't listen to her husband, and she pretty much deserved everything that she got coming to her. And when you actually read the story, there's a lot here that's left out. And you're wondering what really went on with Vashti and Xerxes. Because as you read the story, you find out in Esther chapter 1 that Vashti did, have this great party for the girls. And at some point in the feast, on the seventh day, actually, the king calls for Vashti to come and it says display her beauty, and you have to wonder, what does that mean exactly? Because Vashti said no. And you got to understand, during this time, like, this is the most powerful person on planet Earth for her, in her world for sure. Whether he was the most powerful person in the world, I don't know, but might have been other kings in other places. But in Vashti's world, he was definitely the most powerful person. And he said, hey, I want you to come over here and show off your beauty to my guys. And she says, no, I'm not coming. And you have to wonder why. And it doesn't tell us why. And I've heard many people try to fill in the blanks there with things like, well, she was just, full of herself and, didn't want to obey her husband. Like, that should be a thing. Okay. And there's all these different reasons why they say she didn't come, but there actually doesn't tell us any reason why she didn't come. And as I read that story and think about this community of where the men have the ultimate power, why wouldn't a woman come to display her beauty? What would that mean? Could it be that she was afraid of something? Your husband's the most powerful man in the world, and he can kill you with a snap of his fingers. And you said no. So coming to this party would have to be more fearful than that. Something more scary than that. What could be more scary than that? Saying no to this guy would have dire consequences. And we're going to try and act like she didn't know that? I think she knew that. So for something going on here, what exactly was it? We don't really know. Okay, all we know is she said no. Now, when she said no, the king took it very personally, as she probably suspected that he would. Not only did he take it personally, all the guys in his court ganged up with him, and they took it personally. They said, not only has she offended you, my king, she's offended us, and you can't have this. So you got to do something. Well, what he did was he said, I'm going to get rid of her. Fortunately, he didn't kill her. Now, we don't know what happened to her. It says he put her away. What does that mean? It's kind of left, again, to speculation. We don't really know what that means. We know that she was no longer part of the story. We know that. That's really all we know. We don't know being put away to was she put on a secluded island and given the rest of her days to live out in peace with a royal court attending her? We don't know. Was she put into the harem and just locked in a room somewhere and nobody ever talked to her again? We don't know what happened to her. But this story is as much about Vashti as it is about Esther. This woman, again, was in a very powerless position in this place in history where anything could be done to her. And something was done to her. So that was kind of the beginning of it. Now, what happens next is the guys get around Xerxes and they say, hey, dude, you need a new wife. And that should be somebody more obedient and definitely somebody even more beautiful. And Vashti was known to be very beautiful. So in true Donald Trump style, he decides to throw a beauty pageant. And it is quite the beauty pageant because the story tells us that these girls, as they are selected from all across the land, from many different kinds of people, because they not only oppressed the Jews, they oppressed other kinds of people as well. They just gathered them up. They were getting slaves from everywhere. So he gathers up all these girls, goes around through the kingdom and finds them all. And they have to have like a year's worth of preparation before they get their day with this king. Can you imagine? I mean, They're being sweetened with perfume. Their hair is being combed. Their skin is being massaged with oil to literally make them smell sweeter than a flower. And they have to go through this for like a whole year before they even get one day with him. These are the pretty young virgins, all right? But one of them is going to be selected. And what does that day with him entail? Like what goes on there? Again, we don't know. We can only speculate what happens when they get the day, this time. Well, Esther's time does come up, and he is so taken with her that he decides that he's going to make her the queen, which is awesome. It seems that things are going well for her. But this is a scary situation. I mean, gosh, when you think about where you could be living in the land in this time, I have to say it would have been easier to just take a husband that would have been, kind of below the radar and hang out somewhere else. She's like right in the thick of the crazy that could be going on in this land. Okay. She is now in the king's household. He's made her the queen. She's also kept her identity and her heritage a secret because she's concerned about that, because there's some racism going on in her time. And there is even a bad guy out there. His name is Haman. And he is like targeting her people and trying to incite hatred, amongst the other people to do things to her people. And here she is. She's the queen, sort of, in a land where the queen doesn't really have much power. But that's what's going on. She's the significant other of the most powerful man in her world. I want to address something else that I've heard many times as I hear stories like this told, and even stories of other women in history. I've heard men say things like, well, women like this just use their feminine wiles. I would have to say something. Damn right. Why shouldn't they? It's the only thing they had. Honest to God, think about this. Women in this position, they're not bigger, okay? They're not stronger. They don't have the money. And every time they turn around, they're being oppressed. Women and children. 10,000 years of oppression going on here. What tools do they have in the tool bag to even survive? Never mind fight back. This girl was pretty. That's what she had. That was the tool in her tool bag. And she was in the hotbed of crazy, where so many things could go wrong for her people, for any children that she would have. Can you imagine being Esther in the middle of this mess? Nothing is secure for her. Do you know that if a woman in that position has children and something happens to her husband, there could be an uprising and her and all of her kids would be murdered in a single night? This is the kind of stuff that goes down in that kind of a place, And we're looking at, she knows Vashti was asked to do something that she said no to, and she was put away. Esther has only limited things that she could do. And she's pretty, and he seems to have given her favor. So she has this ability to get in front of him. Not like the kind of ability that you and I would have with our husbands, where you just walk into the kitchen and say, hey, Francois, that's my husband. Say, hello. She can't just walk into the kitchen and talk to him. She actually has to make an appointment to go see her husband. And she has to be allowed in. And in fact, if he says no, it could be the death penalty for her. Who has a marriage like that? Really? Like, how do you even compare that? Every time she wanted to voice her opinion, she was literally taking her life in her hands. Think about that. So Esther shows incredible bravery because this plot is unhatched. Her uncle finds out that somebody tried to prepare a plan to kill the king. And so Esther, on one of her visits to the king, where she's allowed in, lets them know that this is happening. and lets him know that it was her uncle that discovered the plot. And that, of course, gives her uncle great favor in the king's court. And of course, he's very happy that, this was found out and he wasn't dethroned. So time goes on a little bit further. And in the land, there is more hatred being riled up, mostly by this guy named Haman. He's decided he really doesn't like Esther's people. He's doing all kinds of things to incite violence against them. And at one point, he decides that he's going to have a parade. And, actually, the king says to him, if somebody did a lot of good things for me, what should we do for him? And Haman says, well, we should have this great big parade and celebrate him. Now, Haman thinks the king is talking about him, Haman. So he, of course, in his pride and arrogance, wants to have a great big parade celebrating him so he can show off to his friends about how awesome he is. So he makes all the preparations for this great big event. And he also builds gallows, like to murder a few people at the celebration, those that he's decided who are his enemies, which are Esther's people. So as the story progresses, Esther is able to reveal to her husband what Haman's been up to. And of course, her husband, Xerses, was not planning to actually celebrate Haman at all. He was planning to celebrate Mordecai because Mordecai had saved his life. So can you imagine Haman's surprise when he finds out that this is not how this went down, okay? When he realizes that it is Mordecai who is going to be promoted and celebrated and not himself. And of course, the plot has now found out that he was planning to kill Mordecai. The king, of course, hangs Haman on the gallows that he prepared to hang Mordecai on. So it's kind of like he got his just desserts. Great story, right? There's a couple of things to take from this story. Esther is a woman of incredible bravery. She didn't bury her head in the sand, even though she was surrounded by all kinds of reasons to bury her head in the sand. This is a scary, scary place in history for a woman to stand out at all. But when the crisis came, she said something that was really significant. It's a quoted verse in the Bible by many people, not really knowing the whole story. She says, I believe she's speaking to Mordecai, and she says this, and she goes, Mordecai says to her, do not think it's because you're in the king's house that you're going to escape. If you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance may come for your people from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And this is the most quoted part of this. He says, who knows that you might have come to your royal position for such a time as this. For such a time as this. So, ladies, we live in another time. And it's a pretty good time for us, really, in the Western world. I have to clarify that because there are women and children all over the world today who are living oppressed lives. There are people in tribes and communities across the world where women are put to death for having an opinion that is contrary to a man's. That's still happening in our time. And those of us who think that we have done all the work there is to do in this regard are sadly mistaken. We have not. As long as that situation exists, we have not. As long as Epstein mansions exist with torture chambers underneath them for women and children, we haven't done all that we need to do. The sex trade is prevalent today as it was in Esther's time. Children are stolen away from their parents in countries even like America. What the heck? These things are still happening in our world. And we forget about this because we think we got it pretty good. We can vote. We're in leadership. We can run for political positions. But do we? Did you know that less than 20% of all positions that are political are women holding those positions? I mean, just go open up your, whatever it is where you're from. You know, in Canada, we've got the Parliament, House of Parliament. So go look at the pictures. How many pictures in those stands, you know, of women holding those positions? Member of Parliament, MPs, they call them here. How many are women? Less than 20%. And the same is true in the US. If you go into the Senate, you know, it doesn't matter which area you go into of the American political arena, look at who is sitting there. Less than 20% women. Same in the UK. Have we done all that we're supposed to do? You know that we are making a difference. We really are. Worldwide, we're making a difference. And there are certain statistics that are bearing that out. World poverty is down about 20% over the last 100 years. Do you think that women having a place in politics at about the 20% level might be making a difference? It is. So we need to do more, ladies. We were born for such a time as this. We have 10,000 years of oppression that we need to overcome. And you might have gone through things in your own personal life where you were one of the oppressed or where things happened to you. Today is a new day. So what do we need to do to step forward and to do great things? It doesn't matter what kind of oppression we're living under. We can have the bravery to step up and say, yeah, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to go for those higher levels in my company. I'm going to be an entrepreneur and change the world. I'm going to run for politics. What are you going to do differently in this time? You were born for a purpose, for such a time as this. So, gals, it's time to rise up and be the leaders that this world needs, because we don't need more capitalists. We need happy capitalists. That's what we say in my company all the time. What's the difference? Well, a capitalist is kind of like a Viking. They just ride in, they rape, pillage, and plunder, and they take everything and they leave. A capitalist without a heart is somebody who says, well, let's make lots of soap and pour out chemical poisons into the river because we can make a lot of money by dumping it into the river and not dealing with chemicals properly. Because all we really care about is making profit. All we really care about is making sure the shareholders get more. We don't really care what the product line does to people or the people are poisoned by it. That's the kind of capitalism that is truly evil. A happy capitalist is someone who says, you know what, let's add value. Let's create win-win-win situations where it's good for me, the owner of the company. It is good for the employees of the company. It is good for the earth. It's good for the people who use the product. That's a happy capitalist. It's capitalist that has heart and doesn't forget that as we are putting things out there into the world, that it's got to go somewhere. There's going to be consequences to it. I believe that happy capitalists are grandmothers. A lot of us are grandmothers. We're not just caring about, did we make a profit? We're caring about what's going to happen to the next generation. So ladies, rise up. Become these women who make a difference. Whatever realm that you're operating in, you were called for such a time as this. So rise up and live it out and be the change in the world that you want to see. I'm Kerry George, CIBN TV. Find more of us on YouTube. Happy capitalism.